And we're going to begin with the blessing for study, and we're going to end with the blessing of the Omer for today. But let's begin with the blessing for study.
Okie dokie, hold on a second here. Let me share my screen.
I'm wondering if people didn't realize it was at 5:45.
They may not, but we
We're here.
advertised it.
Starting nevertheless, because we need to end a quarter.
That's good. I'm right.
Okay, thank you, Muriel.
Hold on, it's in the process of sharing. It's just a little slow.
Maybe you need some coaching.
From my dog?
I was being funny, yes.
That's very cute.
New.
Did we lose him?
New?
Hi, Fred.
Does that work?
Hi, how are
Oh,
you?
we haven't seen it yet, Jerry. We're
Okay, it's not
waiting.
working.
Keep waiting. It's on its way through the internet. Hold on. It should be showing up any second.
Okay, good.
No?
Not yet.
Good.
Yes?
Not
No.
yet.
Really? Really?
Swear.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot in the internet.
We've also lost your picture.
Yeah, I can't see anybody actually. Side by side gallery. Okay, that's what I've got. Gallery.
Hold on.
Yeah,
The
but
wheel-
when I see Road of Sholem, it's a blank.
All right, welcome,
The
Chip
little
and
wheel.
Henry. I get to at least welcome you while we're waiting. And Wesley is here tonight. And Eric, hello, hello. And Muriel, I never said hello. I just got to laugh at your joke. Okay. So the bracha will come up soon. So why don't we just all settle into our chairs and be grateful for the fact that we had a really lovely day today. So I hope that folks, and I think everyone but Julie is here in Philadelphia or the environs, and that you got outside or that you at least had an open window. Any news from Jerry? No.
Jerry, we don't see your picture either, so I have a
We
feeling
lost
it's your
you.
internet connection.
Very-
None of that is helpful.
Okay, so
That's
Oh.
because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. It's all up to the electronics and the internet and my computer.
All right.
So we
So
see you
I'm-
again.
I'm going to tell you that we have a
Mhm.
double portion tonight. And we're going to begin with the bracha, and here it is. Thank you,
Here it is.
Internet.
Baruch Hashem.
We're
Hold on.
diving into
Baruch
a
Hashem.
double portion,
Wait a
and
minute.
here we go, my dear friends.
Baruch.
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech
haolam
haolam
Asher
asher
kiddushanu
kiddushanu b'mitzvotav
mitzvotav
v'tzivanu la'asot
la'asok
b'divrei
b'divrei Torah.
Torah. And actually, Morag, would you read the English for us? Just you.
Yep. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, who calls us to holiness through mitzvot, commanding us to engage in the study of Torah.
Thank you. So I'm going to begin by just telling a little bit about where we are in the Torah. You can take that down now, Jerry. Thank you so much. So we're in really the middle of the Torah. We're in Leviticus, which is just kind of nonstop laws. And these two portions, as you may know, there are 52 weeks in the Torah, in the calendar, and there are more Torah portions than there are weeks. So at several points, we have double portions, and this is one of those weeks when we have two. The first one is Acharimot, and the second one is Kedoshim. And both of them are pretty problematic for us as gay folks because the prohibition against male sexuality appears and is reiterated in the second, it says first in the first one and also in the second one. So I know some of you have this book. My books are sliding and I apologize. Torah Queeries. And I think that actually, you had a teacher who used this book week after week. And both of the essays that appear are written by Torah scholars who try mightily. They're both totally brilliant and awesome scholars, but to reconcile from a contemporary point of view these two difficult portions. It's not what the whole portion is about, but the fact that this ruling against male sexuality appears is, of course, problematic for us. And the two essays in this book were written by, the first one is by Ellie Dorff, who is an esteemed professor at the American Jewish University. And I believe he also teaches maybe either at USC or UCLA or both. He's a Los Angeles scholar. He's really one of the primary leading scholars in the conservative movement. And he was one of the people who made a decision for the conservative movement. And he wrote the essay called How Flexible Can Jewish Law Be? Those of you who are interested in the particulars of Jewish law, I recommend his essay. And then the following essay, the following portion is written by another scholar who I don't know as well, but it's equally kind of dense and very, very specific about the history of Jewish law. And his name is David Brodsky. Sex in the Talmud, How to Understand Leviticus 18 and 20. So that's what the focus is. And what I wanted to do was to look at, now you all know that my favorite Torah commentary is the Women's Torah Commentary. And that book, which looks like this, includes, and Muriel's got one and a couple of you have them. That book includes a commentary on each portion. And in addition, it has something called, it has rabbinic commentaries, and then which are in a separate portion. In other words, looking back, what do the rabbis say, even though in the general commentary, different rabbis are quoted. And then there's something called a contemporary reflection on each portion. And that's what Jerry is going to show us now. First, the one for Acharei Mot, the first portion that we look at, and this is an excerpt of what Dr. Judith Plaskow wrote in this book. So those of you who are familiar with this book may have read this before. Judith Plaskow is essentially one of two or three contemporary Jewish feminist theologians. And her book, Standing Again at Sinai, really kind of broke open the whole conversation about where are women in the Torah. So we had our prayer, thank you. And now we're going to take a look at Dr. Plaskow's contemporary reflection, which I cut and pasted because it was a couple of pages and I wanted us to only look at part of it. So we're going to take a look at her work, and just give me 1 minute. I have 3 pages here. Okay, good. So we want, yes, thank you. That's exactly what I want, Jerry. Thank you very much.
You didn't realize that I cut it was too long to put in. The print would have been too small, so I cut the bottom half and it's on the next slide.
Put on another page. Terrific. Great. So this is from there, and I don't want to read the whole thing, but maybe, yeah, we could read this out loud and pay attention. So David, you're a great reader. If you wouldn't mind reading the first 2 paragraphs for us. Can you read it, or is it too hard? Oh, you're muted, my friend.
I can't read it, it's too small.
Oh, all right.
I'll try.
Can you make it bigger, Jerry, or not?
That's funny because I thought it was too big. Maybe on my screen it's very big.
Oh, All right.
Let me try.
Okay.
Leviticus 18 is one of two passages in the Torah, the other being Leviticus 20, that consists of sexual regulations meant to distinguish Israel from the surrounding nations and make it a holy people.
So I'm going to stop you there. So these two portions that we're reading, the second, don't go there, Jerry, not yet. Thank you, my dear. Just stay.
Yep.
That this second portion that we're going to be looking at is called Kadoshim, which means holiness. So both of these portions are asking us, asking the reader, asking history, what is holiness? What does it mean to become a holy people? And so here, this very specific question that Dr. Plaskow is going to address is, what is sacred sexuality? So here, so I want you to continue reading. That was great, Heshi. Just keep going.
Although the prohibitions in our passage have a profound impact on Western sexual morality, its assumptions are remote from, and in some cases even aberrant to, contemporary sensibilities. First of all, Leviticus evaluates sexual behaviors not in terms of the emotional and relational dimensions of sexual experience that are so central to judgments about sexual morality today, but in terms of the categories of purity and pollution. The purpose of anti-pollution laws is to impose structure on the chaos of experience by ensuring the social and symbolic boundaries are respected and that things conform to their proper class. Leviticus 18 forbids a series of discrete behaviors that supposedly cause defilement and thus disrupt the social religious world, but it offers no positive understanding of holy sexuality.
All right, so this is pretty dense, but I hope that we can take it apart here and see what she's talking about. Would someone like to try and rephrase it in a couple of sentences? You can raise your hand because I can't see everyone at once when there's a text up. Or you can just speak if you have an idea here to share. Anyone?
So it sounds to me, so where it says, first of all, Leviticus evaluates sexual behaviors not in terms of emotional and relational. So are we looking at sex outside of the context of love or relationship?
That's exactly it.
Like rape.
Yeah, well, like just sex qua an exchange between two people that has no context.
It has no emotional relationship or.
That's right. That's right. And it's a very different way than we as contemporaries think about it, as she points out. And as her use of this phrase at the very end of what we have here, it offers no positive understanding of holy sexuality. We don't see that at all in the Torah. We don't see much about sexuality, except that, you know, when we look at the matriarchs and patriarchs, and we see that Isaac found comfort in his connection with Rebecca. His mother had died, Sarah had died, and he finds comfort. So that for us would be the equivalent of, that's an emotional response, you know. So we know that they lie together, and, you know, all of us on this call know that just the physicality of having the pleasure of being with another human being and feeling their warmth, especially now when we can't hug anybody, or some of us have been fortunate to hug a few people. But that is, we don't have much of that in the Torah. We don't have much talk about love. That's why we lift up the Song of Songs, especially at this time of year. Some of you may know that between Passover and Shavuot, we lift up the Song of Songs, which is this incredible love poem that also lifts up the beauty of the human body. and elevates it, but that's not found so much in the 5 books. So the Song of Songs, of course, is in the Tanakh, not in the Torah. So that's what she's referring to. Now, she lists several things, and then I jumped already to number 4. As I said, first of all, and now we're up to 4. And I can just tell you what she, oh, no, I can't, because I'm copied this, not the whole thing. We're going to go right to 4, and let's have someone. Fred, can you read this last paragraph or this paragraph?
Beginning with 4th.
Yeah.
Okay,
4.
great. Yeah. 4th, the passage in Leviticus 18, most often cited today, namely the prohibition of male anal intercourse in verse 22,
Yeah.
serves as a major justification for homophobia in current religious and political debates, and also helps to maintain gender hierarchy. A man who penetrates another man as one lies with a woman is guilty of mixing or confusing kinds. He treats another man as one should treat only a woman, thereby moving a male body into the category of female. In the world of Leviticus, doing so both unmans the particular man who is the penetrated partner and threatens the notion of penetrative intercourse as a defining aspect of gender difference.
And we have been living with this text for thousands of years, and now we can understand it, we hope, somewhat better from both a feminist and a gay perspective, and realize, number one, that of course, gay and lesbian and sexuality in general is much more complex and varied than anal intercourse. That's one expression for some people, not all. But this was a very reductive and narrow understanding. And then she goes on the next page, we're not going to read the whole thing, but to talk about, and here, Jerry, you can bring up the next slide if you've got access to it. Thank you. And I know it's really small, so I'm just going to read where she begins. It seems then that despite its attempts to promote holiness, Leviticus 18, which is in our first portion this week, far from fostering holiness in sexual relations, reflects and reinforces many of the structures of domination that support sexual and family violence. So it's a very different understanding of sexuality. And she asks for a contemporary understanding that moves well beyond this portion. So we're not going to read much more here, except, well, I want to take a look. She asked some really, really good questions here, beginning about 6 lines from the bottom. Somebody who can, is there someone who could see it, who could read the questions? Anyone? Because otherwise I'll do it. I'm going to just read the questions. So I just want these to kind of sink on you. These are the questions that Dr. Plaskow asks when reading what has been, both for Jews and Christians, anyone who follows Hebrew scriptures, one of the most problematic portions. So she asks, Dr. Plaskow asks, what should be included on a list of forbidden and permitted relationships today? Are there certain bottom lines that we would want to be part of any statement on sexual intimacy, on sexual norms? How do we balance the need to safeguard those with less power in sexual relationships with the desire to lay out a constructive vision of holy sexuality? She goes on and asks a few more questions, and I just think that we could spend the whole hour just on her questions here. How might we articulate a person-centered ethic that focuses on qualities of human connection rather than on the intrinsic nature of particular sexual behaviors? What would happen if we looked at the relationship between people who become intimate and decide to embark on a sexual relationship? What is the between? Martin Buber, the great 20th century theologian, talks about God in the in-between. He's the one who came up with ich and du, I and thou, that God is between two people. So how much the more so is a holy connection that involves intimate physicality and sexuality? What's going on there? It's not just a transaction between two bodies. What place do we give to feelings as a dimension of holy sex? How should pleasure figure into our ethic, for example? How do we attend to the social structures that undergird and make possible holy and sustainable relationships? And then her last question, what social rights and obligations might we see as fundamentally connected to the ability to create satisfying relationships? So here she puts forth what we would call the modern questions about sexuality and intimacy, as opposed to this ancient, this is right and this is wrong, with no real definition of what is right and correct. And, we come from this deeply patriarchal tradition where everything we're reading and all the conversations about them were passed on by men. So Jerry has now moved on to the next portion, which begins with chapter 18, verse 1. This portion is called Kedoshim, holiness. And so we have the opportunity to ask, okay, so what is holiness?
Is it big enough for you?
Pardon, can you make it bigger?
Yes.
Let's do it.
I just have to stop for a minute because I had no idea how big or small these things look on
Okay.
people's screens. So hold on a second here.
Welcome, Marilyn and Jackie and Stephanie and Jeffrey. Hadn't seen you before. Wesley's here, but we can't see his beautiful face. And Yolana, welcome.
Thank you. I had trouble getting in, but it all worked out.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're here. So what we're doing is way too fast, a double portion, where we're talking about the most challenging chapters. And part of what's been most terrifically challenging is that the chapter that forbids homosexuality, male homosexuality, and really explicitly guiding to anal intercourse, has traditionally been read at Yom Kippur in traditional congregations. And so many people grew up with this sense of, wait, this is what's, this is forbidden and this is who I am. How can, here, Fred is nodding his head. What can that, how can we live with that? So historically, the Reform movement and other movements took these readings out, did not have them as part of the High Holiday liturgy, and said we can't deal with it. And there were many conservative congregations that also said, wait a minute, we can't read this anymore. We need to reinterpret this. And this was part of what Dr. Rabbi Dorff was doing with his reinterpretation. So now we're going to be moving down. Thank you. It is much bigger. So this is chapter 18 of the book of Leviticus, the beginning of Parashat Kedoshim. And I would love a reader who don't run it up. Yeah, thank you. Leave it right there. Thank you very much. And I would love here, Fred, why don't you start and read English. Let's do the first 5 verses because they're on the screen.
Okay, great. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. You shall each revere his mother and his father and keep my Sabbaths. I, the Lord, am your God. Do not turn to idols or make molten gods for yourselves. I, the Lord, am your God. When you sacrifice an offering of well-being to the Lord, Sacrifice it so that it may be accepted on your behalf.
So let's stop right there for now, just for a rest. What's going on here? I would love to hear from one or more of you. Again, you're going to have to raise your hand, and I think that will pop up so I can see you if anyone would like to speak, or you could just speak out because
Well,
the weird thing.
sound-
Okay.
Jeff, these sounds like the commandments, like the 10 Commandments or all the commandments.
Yes, very good. They do. And in fact, we've seen this commandment before. Revere your mother and father. We heard that one before. Okay. So, and the 10 Commandments also begins about be like me. I'm God. I'm holy. So here we have very explicitly, and to whom are these? So God spoke to Moses, but what is God saying? What's God telling Moses to do? Take a look at this verse 2.
Tell your community.
Yes, everybody is holy. You shall be holy, for I am holy. Speak to the whole Israelite community. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Lots of you have noticed that the names of synagogues, Addis Israel, that's Adat Yisrael. Okay, that is the community. The word Edah means community or congregation or community group. And so it's also the word aid. Aid is the word for witness. So these are kind of the witnesses who come together to create a community. So these are God's witnesses, and we are challenged here to be holy. And now we have to figure out what holiness means. And then we have a list. And what's really interesting, I mean, we could spend the whole time on this too. Ish imo v'aviv tira'u. So those 4 words, you shall each revere his or your mother and father. What's interesting about that line for anyone? Marilyn, you want to say something? You popped up.
Yeah, no, I don't know, except that my translation is so completely different from that I'm a little bit confused. So
Okay, what is the translation you're looking at on chapter 18, verse 2?
speak to the Israelite people and say to them, I, the Lord, am your God. But then it says, you shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, or the land of Canaan to which I am taking you, nor shall you
Are
follow.
you on chapter 18,
Yes.
verse 1?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very
Okay.
confused.
This is 19 verse.
19.
This is 19
Oh,
verse.
this is 19. My
Oh.
mistake.
Oh.
My mistake. I'm really sorry. We're on
Oh,
chapter
that's okay.
19, verse 1.
Oh, I'm
Thank
That's
you.
why it's confusing, Marilyn.
Yes, and I confused you, and slachli.
Oh, well,
50,
thank you.
please.
Oh, no,
Okay.
now, okay. I
And
didn't.
now you're with me.
Okay.
Isn't B'Tselem Elohim in a sense, doesn't that take care of all of this? We're made in God's image.
Well, that's a wonderful question. It does. And as you know, the Torah repeats itself in many different ways. So early on in Genesis, we are created B'Tselem Elohim. But here we are also taught, all right, what does that mean? What does it mean to be created in God's image? Now, interestingly, God does not have parents. Yet we are told in verse 3, you shall each revere tira'u. The word revere in English, the word in Hebrew here, tira'u, is yir'ah. It's a word that's often used for God. You shall be in awe of God. But the word for awe and fear are the same. So you shall be in awe of your parents, you shall, it's not fear to be afraid of, it's more fear to honor. But what's really interesting here is that it doesn't say you shall love your parents. And in other places, there is love involved with parents, but this phrase is often brought up when we have a conversation about the complexity of dealing with our parents. And so even though there aren't a lot of us on this call, well, there are some of us who still have living parents. And we know that our relationships with our parents throughout our lives, and maybe particularly for us as gay folks, has been challenging. You know, who are we? We're not like them. Very few gay people have gay parents. Some do. But, you know, the whole idea of growing up with parents who are profoundly different than you, which is true for most people, but particularly for those of us who have taken a different path in our lives. And yet, we need to find a way to be in connection with those people who gave us birth or who raised us. For some of us, it's both. And for some of us, it's two batches of people. And it's pretty complicated both throughout our lives and after their deaths. So that's obviously another conversation we could all have. But for those of us who still have living parents, here's one of the directions in the Torah about how do I revere my parents? What does caring for my parents at this time mean? Yeah, Chip and Henry. I don't know which of you raised your hand, but you've got a hand up.
Yes, that would be Chip. Thank you. I think when we were talking about Exodus, that we had said that there was, you shall honor your father and your mother, and father came first and mother came second. And here in revering, it's mother coming first and father coming second.
Good attention. This is good paying attention. Thank you. So what could that mean for each of us? We can ask. You know, and particularly coming out of a deeply patriarchal culture where we might expect father always to come first. Good heavens, most people on this call, not everybody, grew up watching a television program called Father Knows Best. We didn't even think about it, right? Of course, father knows best. Not always. Okay. So let's go down and continue, Jerry, to the next few verses. Thank you. All right, so the first one has to do with having food for a sacrifice, the first couple of them, and we go down to that. And then here, number 9, let's read both 9 and 10. Muriel, can you be our reader for verses 9 and 10 in English? Oh, you have to unmute yourself, please.
I can't see the not.
All right.
Wait. When you reap the harvest, is that what you?
Yeah, that's it. Those 2 verses.
When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I, the Lord, am your God. That always resonates with me because my son-in-law, they always have a garden, and when I would be taking care of the cats, this is a few years ago, there'd always be stuff growing over. And even though I was supposed to be picking things, I would sort of leave it thinking about that.
Good. Wow.
There's something about this that I find very meaningful.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else want to say something about this? Does it remind you of anything else? It did for Muriel. It was very resonant. Yeah, Heshi.
So it seems to me that a lot about being holy has to do with kindness and taking care of the stranger and caring for your community. I can relate to caring for your community. But I think with regards to holiness, you need a community to be holy. I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, without my community, you know, I'm just me, but you know, the things I care about are the things that I think apply to holiness or apply to, I don't want to say godliness, but just, you know, taking care of the stranger. That, you know, that's a relationship between you and your community offers me an opportunity to be holy.
Perfect. And some of you may know, I mentioned earlier, and I'll try and point out things like this. The names of synagogues, sometimes there's a name of a synagogue, and then at the end of it will say in English, KK. And KK stands for, who knows? Anyone know? Yes, Kihila Kadosh or Kihila Kadosha, a holy community, a holy gathering. And particularly in Orthodox communities, you'll see the name of the shul written in Hebrew, and it will have kuf kuf, Kihila Kadosha, after it. Or sometimes KKL, which I think is Kihila Kadosha Ladonai. I would have to check that one. But anyway, I love what you've said, Hesh. That's exactly right. All right. Now, no one mentioned the book of Ruth. And why am I bringing that up? Around verse 9. Does anyone remember? The beautiful story of the book of Ruth, where Boaz, where she is sent out to, Boaz is the landowner, and he tells his people, leave the corners of the field for Ruth, for the gleaners, for those who will come and gather the leftovers. When you reap the harvest, and that's the law that he is following, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave that for the poor. And that's what comes in the next line. And here he's the gleaner, but the two verses that Muriel read for us take us into the vineyard as well. So the whole idea of leaving things on the ground for those who might be in need.
That's also why the Orthodox don't cut the corners of their hair.
That's right. Thank you. All right, let's continue with the next slide, please, or whatever we call this.
What's
Next
the cutting of the hair have to do with that? I'm not following.
All right. Do you want to talk about the cutting of the hair?
They let the corner is called the payah. That's the corner of the field. So to remember that as a visual symbol, they don't cut the corners of their hair of their heads. So they let the hair grow under their ears.
Yeah, and so they're called payas, but it's payah. So, and you know, as they study, often they'll just twirl it around. So people have really straight hair, but they could have curly locks or along the side. Men.
Payah means corner?
Yes.
Oh. Well.
Yeah.
So they're not leaving their hair for those that are follically challenged? I said they're not leaving their hair for those that are follically challenged.
Right.
Okay. So
I think you can get a payah transplant.
Okay. So you see here, we continue with more verses that tell about holiness. And again, as Hesh pointed out, we have in 13, you shall not defraud your fellow, you shall not commit robbery, the wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. That's a big one. The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. If someone does work for you, you have to pay. So all of us who have had to wait a long time to get our paychecks, that's not the right thing. Jewish law says this. And then, of course, 14 is a really important one. Who would like to read? Marilyn, can you read 14 for us?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord.
So
Wonderful.
would you like to interpret that for us a little?
Well, I mean, insulting the deaf and placing a stumbling block before the blind, both of them are so specific. So I'm going to say that they're both metaphors for being kind to people who are less, who are disabled in some way, in any way at all, I would think, to help people.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone want to add to that?
What strikes me about all of this and what I think about is it's so important to do for those who are in need, because at the turn of a hat, you could be one of those people.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey.
And does it matter that in the same verse, it says you shall fear your God right after it has said to do these things? Remember, remember.
There's a context. There's a context to this. Yes. Good. Thank you. And then here, wow, this is very timely, isn't it? Number 15, Eric, do you want to read this one for us?
You should not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kinsman fairly.
A really hard one to do sometimes, as we know, and because our feelings get in the way. And what is real justice? We're asking that question again and again and again. So here it is, thousands of years ago, we're told that to create a truly society that is sacred, we shall not render an unfair decision. And this, this isn't addressed only to judges. This is addressed to everyone. So that means my judging myself, and it means my judging another person. And not favoring the poor or showing deference to the rich. Either. What does it mean to judge each other fairly? Now that's a whole course. All right, let's go on to the next one because we want to make our way. Oh, this is so beautifully big. This is great, these last three. Okay, wow. I mean, in some ways, the one we just read, 15, goes perfectly with 17. So Eric, why don't you read 17 for us also, please?
You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Reprove your kinsman, but incur no guilt because of him.
So this is especially poignant after we've just read that these are the portions that have prohibitions against what they consider to be immoral behavior, and this challenges us again and again to look into our own hearts. And we should not hate another. And here it's very interesting. Again, this is a whole course. What does it mean to reprove your kinsman? There's some books, I should have brought them down to show you, written by Elliot Dorff about what is ethical behavior in Judaism, and the whole issue of what does it mean to reprove another, to correct another, to go to another and say, I think you've made a mistake. And how do we do that in an appropriate way that lets us both grow, that doesn't, that honors the decision-making and the process of the other, while also trying to figure out what does this all mean. And then the final one here, really, Eric, you did such a good job. I'm going to let you take us home. Thank you.
Sure. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your fellow as yourself. I am the Lord.
So does reprove your neighbor but incur no guilt because of him mean that you can reprove him, but not in a way that will make you do something bad that will create guilt on your part. Is that what that means?
I think so. I mean, what it means is that, all right, so if my neighbor's car is blocking my driveway, I wanted to correct him with respect. Why might I incur guilt if I got furious and started smashing in the car?
Okay.
Or if I called the police?
Right.
Isn't
He
this-
suffered.
Isn't this
No.
what teachers are supposed to do? We're
Pardon?
supposed to,
Sue, isn't it?
what?
Yeah.
Teachers are supposed to correct kids without making them feel bad and stupid.
Right. I think it's about face. I think you can correct somebody, but you never want anyone to lose face.
Yes.
Be
About
embarrassed.
shame.
Right. Shame. Yeah.
And the phrase in Hebrew is malbish panim.
Right.
Malbin panim. It means to make someone's face go white.
Oh.
I mean, that's what it is to shame another person. And those of us who have ever felt shame, I mean, we know the blood may run out of our face. I mean, we may just be, lose our ability to speak. So thank you for that, both of you. So no bearing grudges. And this, of course, the last 5 words in Hebrew of the verse 18, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And then the last 2 words, ani Adonai. Love your neighbor as yourself. Again, we could spend hours just on this phrase. What does that mean? And especially, I think, for those of us who have lived with shame for part of our own lives. If we don't love ourselves, how can we love our neighbors? Learning how to love ourselves. Learning how to honor ourselves, because we, line 1, are created in God's image. As we were reminded.
What does kamocha mean? What does kamocha mean?
Like yourself.
Because I think of mi chamocha. The plant.
So mi chamocha is who is like you.
Oh, okay.
Who is like you, O God? Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai. Who is like you among the gods that are worshipped? You're the only one, God. So love your neighbor like yourself. Here, kamocha, like yourself. So who is like yourself, God? And that's mi kamocha. And then v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, like yourself. Good questions. Good. All right, I did bring one more thing for us to look at. We're going to quickly look at it. And then, all right, we have 2 more things, I guess. Okay, so this I found actually on my Instagram today. So somebody posted it. Who hasn't read? I would love another voice we haven't heard from today. Jackie, would you read this little one?
Sure. Holiness means being special, though not in a glib way. It means setting yourself apart from the common herd. It means doing good with your life and for the lives of others, standing for your best even when others race for the worst in themselves. This meaning is undeniable and unalterable. It stands as a testament to Torah's divine and abiding truth.
So here's an answer to the question. We didn't get to explore as much as I wanted to, but if you take away from this class something, I hope it's asking yourself what holiness means to you. I would love to hear some answers for anyone who would like to think about it, because here we have Rabbi Middleberg, who I do not know yet. Maybe someday I'll get to meet him. And this is his definition: being special, although not in a glib way. And this is actually where we could spend, yet again, so much time, holy as opposed to who and what, but holiness for each of us. The setting ourselves apart. We didn't talk about the fact that the root of the word kadosh means to set apart. So when we make, it's the same root as kiddush, as kedusha, as kaddish, lekadesh. It's to make holy, to be holy, to set apart. And a wedding is kedushin, is setting apart your partner for yourself. That when we are privileged to find somebody with whom we want to make a life, we are setting ourselves apart only for that person. We are setting ourselves apart. God is setting our people apart and setting us apart. So what does it mean to be set apart? And particularly in a world like ours, where we're so dependent on each other. So this is a complicated question for us as Jews and as gay folks. You know, sometimes we really want to be set apart, and sometimes we want to be part of the Kihila Kadosha, that holy community, the community that sets itself apart really very much on purpose, very intentionally. We are a community where we are caring for each other, where we are doing good with our life and doing good for the lives of others. I mean, in some ways, this is enough what he says. Standing for your best, even when others race for the worst in themselves, and maybe even people we love. But the Torah is teaching us to be holy. And just a quick look at what Rabbi Elise Goldstein has to say. If we can look on to the next, there are just two more. So she gives a contemporary reflection for Kedoshim. And she really asks, first, who is holy? You had it, and then we lost it. Good. Who is holy? The whole people. And then at the bottom of there, if you can move down a little bit, Jerry, can you see a little below that, or doesn't it go down?
That's the problem. When I made it bigger, part of it got cut off. So.
Oh, all right. So I'll just say, it says, when are we to be holy? And it says in the future. You see it up at the top. And then why are we to be holy? Because we're imitating God. And then on the next page, you can flip this over. She talks about how to be holy. And that, not she talks about, but she's pointing out that the text tells us how to be holy by caring, by honoring our parents, by caring for others, by leaving the corners of our field, etc. And then she goes on the next, where it's cut off a little bit here, refining the mitzvot as connections rather than boundaries, as dialogue rather than answers, is a first step towards addressing the question of how we will become kadosh. How we as women and gay folks who maybe weren't included in the very, very beginning. So I know this is a lot, but I wanted there to be some food for thought for all of you. You know, what is holiness? How do we redefine holiness in our day? How do we redefine holy sexuality for ourselves and others? These are the questions that I think come up in this week's portion of this double portion. So we're going to end by counting the Omer, but I wonder if there's any questions before we go there. Anything. All right. One thing I did want to point out is that Rabbi Elise Goldstein, who's the writer of the second contemporary reflection that we looked at just now, is the mother of the scholar who wrote this book. So I'm going to just hold up this book. that I held up last week, but here again, it's called A Rainbow Thread. Her son's name is Noam Sienna, and his last name, this is pretty cool. Her name is Goldstein, and Noam's father's last name is Brown. And when they got married, they said, what is gold and brown together? It makes the color sienna, and they named their children with the last name Sienna.
Wow.
Awesome.
So this is Noam Sienna. He wrote this really interesting book where he collected documents from Jewish history that show that there indeed is a rainbow thread of gay, lesbian, and whoops, my house is falling apart in the beautiful breeze that's coming. So anyway, that's just, and today, if I got it right, and Jerry's going to help me here, is the 30, now you're going to get, what day of the Omer?
If you're talking about tonight and tomorrow, it's 24.
All right, tonight and tomorrow, 24 days. Now go back to the previous. You're so good, Jerry. Thank you. All right. So as we talked about last week, we count the Omer every day, and it is a little confusing. It's not quite night, but we're going to cheat a little so that you all, those of you who want to go to the next thing can. And we'll say this bracha together. And if you'd like to unmute, we can say it together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat haomer. Okay, and Chip, would you read in English, the English here, the last two lines?
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with mitzvot and commands us concerning the counting of the Omer.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to the next slide. Thank you so much, Jerry. You did a beautiful job tonight. So, Jerry, I would like you to read in Hebrew, and then we'll have Stephanie do the English after you read in Hebrew.
Hayom chamisha ve'asrim yom shehem shlosha shavuot ve'arba'a yamim la'omer.
Stephanie.
Today is 24 days, which is 3 weeks and 3 days of the Omer.
So now everyone who's on our Zoom has just completed the mitzvah of counting the Omer tonight. And I want to thank you, Jerry, for enabling us to do this and for being a fabulous tech angel, a true angel.